Hello everyone, today we will start practical questions for journal, and the question that I have taken today is question number 1 from your practical questions. Now first let us see the question. Enter the following transactions in the journal of Manohar Lal and Sons. There are some transactions given to us. Now the first important step for us to think is that we have to analyze each transaction and we have to find out what are the two types of accounts involved, and after that we have to see which rules do we have to apply. Now when we look at the first transaction, Manohar Lal and Sons started business with cash. Means Manohar Lal and Sons, they started their business with cash in the form of capital of rupees 60,000. Now this is the format of your journal. First column will be date, then particulars, then ledger folio, amount debit and amount credit. Now in first column, as in means given in the question, the year is 2019 and month is March, so we wrote 2019 March 1. Now when we look at the first transaction, cash was brought into the business. Means we have to think from business point of view and not from the owner's point of view. Now this cash is brought by Manohar Lal in the business, so cash is coming inside the business. When we see cash is a real account and we have to apply real accounts rule. Now another account that is involved in this transaction is capital, because cash is introduced as capital in the business, and capital account is nothing but the proprietor's account, and proprietor's account, it is a personal account, so personal account rule will be applied. Now we know that we have two, sorry for my handwriting, we have two accounts. First is cash and second is capital. Okay, now for cash account we will apply real accounts rule, and for capital we will apply personal accounts rule. Now according to the real accounts rule, cash what comes in, debit what comes in. So since cash is coming inside the business, we will debit cash account, we will write cash account, and here we will write debit. Then capital, since it is a personal account, credit the giver, means the owner, he is giving that 60,000 of rupees to the business for starting. Okay, in the starting, so capital he is giving, so we wrote capital account in the credit side to capital account. Amount is 60,000 on both debit and credit column of amount. Now for the narration, you can write anything you want, means you just have to explain the transaction. Either it is not necessary for you to by heart each and every narration. You can write it in your own words as far as the meaning is clear. Okay, so I wrote narration, cash brought in the business as capital. So now let us see next transaction, purchased furniture for cash. Now in this transaction we have two accounts. First is furniture, because yes, in previous session we have discussed that apart from any goods that is purchased for reselling purpose, we cannot use purchases account. If asset is a fixed asset like furniture, land, building, we have to write its own name, so we will write furniture account, and furniture account is nothing but our real account. And another account involved is cash account. Cash account is also a real account. So according to the rule of real account, debit what comes in. While purchasing this furniture is coming inside our business, so we will debit furniture account, and we are paying cash, that means cash is going out from our business, and we will credit cash account. So here is the entry, furniture account debit to cash account, amount is 10,000 on both the columns. Remember that these two amounts should not be in the same line, it should be adjacent to the entry. Okay, and in narration I have written furniture bought for cash. Now let us see third transaction, purchase goods for cash. Now in here we are talking about goods, that means we have to use purchases account, and since we have purchased those goods for cash, cash is going out from the business, so another account involved is cash account. So purchases account is our nominal account, and according to the nominal accounts rule is that debit all the expenses. Since purchases is our expenses, we will debit purchases account, and cash is going out from the business, and cash is a real account, so cash we will credit, because rule of real account is credit what goes out. The amount is 25,000, and narration I have written goods purchased for cash. Now when we look at next transaction, bought goods from Kamlesh. Now they haven't mentioned whether these goods were purchased for cash or credit, but the name of the seller is given, means Kamlesh's name is given, so we will consider it as a credit transaction. So two types of accounts involved in this transaction is purchases account and Kamlesh's account. Purchases account will be debited, and Kamlesh, since Kamlesh account is personal account, he is the giver. While purchasing goods from him, he is giving us those goods, that means credit the giver, so we credited Kamlesh's account 15,000 in both the column. And narration I have written goods purchased from Kamlesh on credit. In the question on credit is not given, but as per your convenience you can write in your narration that Kamlesh goods were purchased from him on credit. Now let us see next transaction, paid cash to Kamlesh. So in this transaction, the two types of account involved are cash account and Kamlesh account. Cash is going out from the business, that means cash account will be credited, and Kamlesh, he is receiving that cash, and his account is personal account, so debit the receiver. And in narration I have written cash paid to Kamlesh. Now next transaction is purchased goods from Sohan. It is same as the previous transaction of date 5, that goods were purchased from Sohan, but since they haven't mentioned whether this transaction was cash or credit, so we will consider it as a credit transaction. So the two accounts involved are purchases account and Sohan account. Purchases account will be debited as per rule of nominal account, and Sohan accounts will be credited because he is the giver and his account is personal account. So 6,000 of amount we will write in both the columns, and narration will be goods purchased from Sohan on credit. Now let us see next transaction, purchase goods from Sohan for cash. Now in this question they have particularly mentioned that goods were purchased for cash, so in that case we will consider purchases account and cash account. We will not take Sohan's account. Okay, remember that whenever the transaction is cash transaction, if it is purchase or sale, then we will ignore the seller or buyer's name, and we will take purchases or sales account and cash account depending on the transaction. Now since this is a purchases account, so we will write purchases account debited to cash, because cash is going out from the business of rupees 8,000, and in narration we will write goods purchased from Sohan for cash. Now since this is the end of my first page, I have totaled up both the columns, and I have written carried forward, and I got total of 1,39,000 in both the columns, since in both columns we have entered exact same amount for each and every transaction. Now let us see next transaction, our last transaction, paid rent for the office. That means rent was paid for office in cash. They haven't mentioned cash, but still we have to consider, since it is an expense, it will be in cash. So the two types of account involved in this transaction is, one is rent account and second is cash account. So rent account is our expenses account, so according to the nominal accounts rule we have to debit all the expenses, and cash is our real account, and according to the rule of real accounts, credit what goes out. So while paying rent, cash is going out from our business, so we will write rent account debit to cash account rupees 1,000. And see, at the starting of next page you have to write brought forward of 1,39,000, 1,39,000, and in the narration I have written rent paid for office. Now after adding this 1,000 to the previous balance of 1,39,000, we got 1,40,000. Now this was question number 1. I hope you have understood this one. Okay, now let us see another question that I have taken for solving is question number 3. Now this question, some of the transactions are same, but some one or two transactions are new in this question. So first let us see the question. Enter the following transactions in the journal of Sahil brothers. 2000, year is 2018 and month is October. So since these transactions are related with only 1 month, so we don't need to write year and month over and over again. Just we have to change the dates. Okay, we have to write dates according to the transaction. Now first transaction is purchase goods from Anil for cash. Since this is a cash transaction, that means there are two accounts which are purchases account and cash account. So we will make entry purchases account debit to cash account of rupees 40,000. Narration will be goods purchased from Anil for cash. Then next transaction is purchase goods from Atul. Now in this transaction they haven't mentioned for cash, that means it is a credit transaction. In that case we will take purchases account and Atul's account. Since Atul is the giver, his account will be credited, and purchases account as per rule of nominal account will be debited. So our transaction will be purchases account debit to Atul account, Atul 75,000, and in the narration you can write goods purchased from Atul on credit. Now the third transaction is return goods to Atul, means the purchases that we have done earlier, out of that we had returned some goods worth rupees 3,000 to Atul. Now if you remember, in previous session we have discussed purchases return is opposite to purchases account. So if purchases account is debited, then purchases return account will be credited. Okay, so the two accounts, first we have to find out two accounts involved in this transaction. One is purchases return and third is Atul. Okay, now when we talk about purchases return account, it is a nominal account and we have to debit the expense, we have to credit the income. But instead of remembering that, you can just remember that purchases account are always debited and purchases return account are credited. So our purchases return account will be credited, and Atul, since he is the receiver, and as per rule of personal account, debit the receiver. So for this transaction we will debit Atul's account because he is receiving those goods, and purchases return account will be credited with rupees 3,000 each, and in narration we wrote goods returned to Atul. Now next is paid cash to Atul. We have paid some cash to Atul. Now in this transaction the two accounts involved are cash account and Atul account. So Atul, he is receiving cash, so his account will be debited because the rule debit the receiver, and cash is going out from the business, so we will credit cash account here. Atul debit to cash account rupees 50,000, and we wrote cash paid to Atul. Now next transaction is sold goods to Charu, means we sold some goods to Charu. They haven't mentioned whether that sale was made on cash basis or credit basis, so we will consider it as a credit transaction. And in that case the two accounts that are involved, one is sales account and another is Charu account. So when we sell goods, Charu, she is receiving those goods, so according to the personal accounts rule, debit the receiver. So we will debit Charu's account, and sales, it is opposite of purchases account, so you have to remember that purchases account is debited and sales account is credited. So we wrote to sales account rupees 1 lakh, goods sold to Charu on credit is our narration. Now Next transaction, Charu returned 20% of goods. Means earlier we sold goods worth rupees 1 lakh to her, and out of that 1 lakh, 20% of those goods she returned us back. That means 20% of 1 lakh is nothing but 20,000. And if sales account is credited, that means sales return is opposite, that means it will be debited. And Charu, while returning goods to us, she is giving us those goods back, so her account will be credited. And 20% of 1 lakh is 20,000. And since this was the end of my page, so I have found out carried forward amount of rupees 2,88,000 in both the columns. Now let us see the next transaction, paid rent. Now in this transaction, two accounts which are involved are rent account and cash account. So rent account will be debited as per rule of nominal account, and cash account will be credited as per rule of real account. So rent account debit to cash account 2,000. In narration you can just simply write rent paid. Now last transaction, Sahil withdrew for personal use. They haven't mentioned whether he withdrew some goods or cash. So if nothing is mentioned, then you can just assume that he withdrew some cash for his personal use. In that case, you have to write drawings account. The two accounts involved are cash account and drawing account. Now drawing account is a nominal account, and as per rule of nominal account, debit the expenses. So drawings, when the business, when some amount of money or something is taken out from the business, it is loss for the business. Okay, and according to the rule of nominal account, debit all expenses or losses. So we have debited drawings account, and he took out cash, so cash is going out from the business, so cash account will be credited, and amount is 10,000 for both the column. So in narration we wrote cash withdrawn for personal use, and after that we found out total is rupees 3 lakh. I hope you understood these two journal entries, and if there is any confusion you can ask me, because these are the easiest transaction journal entries, and what we will see from next session are little bit complicated. So until unless these concepts are clear with you, you will be able to solve those little complicated questions. So practice and keep on practicing, and I have skipped question number 2, so you can do question number 2 as your practice. Okay, and if you are stuck in somewhere, then you can consult me. Thank you.